WCSH 6. This is 207.
Wow.
With the chefs there. But first, it is the job of reporters to dig into the dim corners of government that are rarely scrutinized. Many reporters are so busy covering day-to-day news that they have little time for that type of investigative work. That's where the Maine Center for Public Interest Reporting comes in.
It's a small nonprofit operation that investigates state government and then shares its stories at no charge with more than 30 newspapers in Maine. John Christie and Naomi Schalit founded the Maine Center for Public Interest Reporting and sat down with us to tell us about their mission.
Our mission is to tell people how state government really works, not the superficial level of who did what or who was annoyed at whom and who responded to that annoyance by saying, you know, he's a bad guy and she's a bad guy. It's about getting underneath the surface and saying what is really going on.
And you came to this because you saw a need that was not being filled.
That's right. What happened in the media in the last 10 years is that the decline in the size of newsroom staffs, necessarily because of the recession. I mean, there's fewer reporters to send off on these long-term stories. It takes a reporter like us anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months to do an in-depth investigative reporting. Well, if you take a reporter out of the regular newsroom to do that long, that's a part of the paper that's not going to be filled with regular everyday news. So that's the gap we saw, and that's why our organization was invented, to fill that gap.
What kind of a response have you gotten so far?
Oh, goodness. People love reading these stories. That's what we hear from them, unless they're the subjects of the stories, and then they often don't like it. But even the subjects of our stories, in one case, someone who was the head of an agency that we wrote about having done some things that were arguably improper, sent us a donation afterwards saying these are good reporters and they're doing the work that needs to be done. So, you know, our stories are long. They're full of detail. We have links to the actual documents that support the conclusions we make in the stories, and people actually love that.
Doing this kind of reporting that can take 3 months is expensive. This is the problem. This is why we don't see more of it. Who pays for you for your work?
Well, first off, we don't charge the newspapers for it or any of our other media partners for it, because Maine media is a relatively poor state. There isn't a lot of money to pay for this extra stuff by the media, and a lot of our stuff goes to weekly papers, and they have very small budgets. So we're funded by foundations, primarily 2 journalism foundations, and local donors, people from Maine, from $10 to $500 to $10,000. Some folks have given us in Maine, and that with the foundations and running a really tight ship. We're a small organization. We pinch our pennies. We've been able to get by so far.
In the general realm of state government, what are stories and areas that are simply being underreported, that we're not hearing about and we should?
Almost everything that's not the governor's office, frankly.
There's a lot of the state budget that's devoted to tax breaks for businesses, corporate welfare, some people call it. So over the last several years, we've done a series of how many now?
About 9 or 10.
9 or 10 stories on corporate tax breaks. And what we're looking at is all that money that is essentially being spent in the budget by not being revenue. Is it working? Is there a reason to even give these tax breaks to corporations? And quite a few times we've come up with the fact that there's really no evidence that they work, but the government still gives them out.
You said you don't want to do stories and not have people read them. Do you think that you're having the kind of impact that you hope to have, that you're bringing about change somewhere down the line?
Well, actually, the impact that we hope to have, we don't have a dog in a fight. We just want to tell a story so that citizens in Maine can understand what is happening with their government and act knowledgeably as citizens to hold their leaders accountable.
We did another series of stories about the state's bail system and discovered, I think to everybody's surprise, that in the state of Maine, unless you're charged with murder or kidnapping, your bail is set by a bail commissioner who has 1 day's training per year. Doesn't even have to have a high school degree to be a bail commissioner and set bail, and has never provided the same information about the defendant that the cops get. As a result of that story and some other things that happened, the state changed its bail system. And we had reported that a man who had been out on cheap bail twice on domestic violence, 3rd time out, killed his wife, his children, and himself. As a result of all of those factors coming together, now the bail for domestic violence defendants is not set by these amateur bail commissioners, but has to be set by a judge. So those are a couple examples of how our stories have informed the debate, the public debate, and changed things.
You've both worked in journalism for a long time for a variety of news outlets. How does this job that you have now compare to others that you've had?
This is the most interesting, the most demanding, and frankly, for a reporter, it's fun.
When you wake up in the morning and you get to write the kind of stories you want to write, it's a joy.
Democrats hate us, Republicans hate us. We've got enemies everywhere. Real happy with that. No one's been able to pin us down ideologically, because we're not ideological, we're not partisan. So it's very satisfying to do journalism the way I always wanted to do it, where we both always wanted to do it. And we'll do it as long as people want us to do it and give us even a modest amount of support.
We're probably the only profession where it's a good sign when many, many people, well, I don't know, hate's a strong word.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's exactly the right word, and I think that John Christie might acknowledge, but you know, that's the idea, is you want to get them, you want them to be attentive and alert and looking out for the public interest, and they don't always do it unless there's a watchdog keeping an eye on what they do.
And they do a great job.
Yeah. If you'd like to learn more about the Maine Center for Public Interest Reporting or read some of its many stories, go to the 207 section of WCSH6.com.